Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo Maheshwara, Gurureva Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Chinmayam Vyapyat Sarvam Trilokyam Sacharacharam Tatpadam Darshitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Tvameva Mata Cha Pita Tvameva Tvameva Bandhuscha Sakha Tvameva Tvameva Vedya Gravitam Tvameva Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva. Jai Guru. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So again, I think Mark said we're in the 12th chapter, and was it verse 24?
23.
23. Chapter 12, verse 23. The bliss of the self. Can you help us out?
Sure. Sukha sadhana topadhe annapanadaya priyaha. Doubt. Be it so, but food, drink, etc. are liked because of their quality of giving happiness and not for their own sake.
So the thing that that's under discussion is, where is happiness? And Vedanta thunders that the phenomenal world, which seems to bring us happiness, granted, it's transient, it's limited, it's conditioned by time and space, it's conditioned by how much we want it, but Vedanta says there is no such thing as worldly pleasure. It does not exist. What we have is a mediated experience of the self. Desire and object of desire come together. For a moment, the mind is temporarily freed from its low level restlessness and discontent. I think he's called this Vishayananda, right?
Yeah.
But I'm really getting a taste of the bliss of the self. But in my ignorance, I do not know that, which causes me to get attached to the phenomena. Now, this is why meditation is so important, why self-inquiry is so important, so that at least on occasion we have the non-mediated experience of the bliss of my self-nature. Now we have another state where we experience the bliss of the self in ignorance. And here he's called it Vasana Ananda, Vasanananda. I was taught that Vasanananda is snooze alarm bliss, what you have right in the morning. He calls the deep sleep state that. Really doesn't matter. The whole point is the mind is folded up into its seed form. So there's no Vikshepa Shakti. There's only Varana Shakti. And because there's no projecting power, there's no restlessness. There are no vikalpas. There are no vrittis. Well, we have one vritti, avidya. That's the only one. And everybody universally loves a deep sleep. So the objector here is saying, now, wait a minute. Food and women or men, they are inherently pleasure giving. The pleasure's there. Now let's see how Vidyaranya responds.
Atmanukulya dannadi samasche damunatrakah anukulayatavya syat ekasmin karma kartrita. If you say that the self is also a means to happiness like food and drink, then we ask, who is it that enjoys happiness? One and the same thing cannot be both the subject and the object of enjoyment.
Yes. Now, is that the reply or is that still the objective?
It's the reply.
It's the reply. So, when I enjoy the bliss of the self, is it an objective experience? No. The cause of the bliss of the self is the removal of attachment and identification with phenomena. They can actually even still be perceived, but I remove the attachment, the sangraha. That's the key. Now, it's interesting. I'm working with a young man who is a Buddhist. He actually has a master's degree in Buddhist studies. He got it from someplace up in, I think, Portland, an outfit that's associated with Naropa Institute. Are if any of you aware of this place? And he studied with a Tibetan Lama. Wasn't a lot of connection for him. And he's convinced that he's had all the experiences that Buddhism has to give you. I'm a little suspicious. But the point is, he's not very happy a lot of the time. He still wants a partner, wants attention and approval. And he's terribly uncomfortable in some social situations. So I have no idea what he's experienced. You know, that's one of the things we cannot really know another person's mind states. But all I can say is the fruit of his practice hasn't given him a whole lot of serenity yet. So what's probably the problem? And this is one of the things we've been working on. Attachment. In his particular Buddhist teaching, he still takes the phenomenal world as real. So the bliss I get through food, it's because of the inherent goodness of food or sex or attention. As long as we're operating from that viewpoint, we have no hope of any serenity. No hope. As long as I'm trying to protect a personal sense of self, no hope of serenity, of real peace of mind. So the whole point of this part of the discussion, when I dance with the objects of the world and they make me happy, I use them to temporarily induce a state where I'm momentarily freed from the low-level discontent and agitation that we run around. And what do most of us do with this? Well, I want release, Jim. I want to go out and dance and smoke cigarettes and do shots and something like this. This is not a moral issue. And I think part of the problem with this fellow is when he was practicing, he was when he was younger, going through this Buddhist studies, he was approaching it from a moral standpoint. He has yet to see that kama, craving, and dukkha, they are the same thing. I'm not unhappy because I'm not getting what I want. I'm unhappy because I'm stuck wanting because of delusion. Any thoughts about this? Now, Shankara and Vivekachudamani says we can't say that Maya exists. We can't say it doesn't exist. Maya is the word we use to describe this illusory power of the infinite. But we can say it's powerful. And if we're really honest, you hear me say over and over again, it's a spiritual axiom that if I'm disturbed, no matter the cause, I'm the one with the klesha, with the defilement, the affliction. And it only really settles down to a few things. I'm attached, I'm identified. Any thoughts? Next verse.
Sukhe vaishayike priti matramatma tvati priyah sukhe vyabhicharatyesha natmani vyabhicharini. Love for the means to happiness is partial love, but the love for the self is infinite. The love for the means passes from one object to another, but the love for the self is steadfast.
Yes. When I finally get, when I dance with an object that is myself, and I'm very clear that when I've done the mediated form, the Vishaya Ananda, it's always finite, it's always limited, it's always temporary. One of my favorite stories about Swamiji. So we were up at Krishnalaya. This has to be 91 or 92. And I can't even remember what the text was. We were having a camp, and what he often would do in the afternoon after his nap, he'd come out, sit on the lawn. He had this kind of lawn chair that he would sit in. We'd all sit around him on the lawn. There would maybe be 20 of us. It was a great opportunity just to bask in his presence and ask questions. So he's doing satsang, and someone came up and they brought him one of these little chocolate, they're like you hand out for Halloween, tiny little piece of Hershey's chocolate. He stops dead, takes the chocolate. Now, he was a diabetic, an insulin dependent diabetic. He wasn't supposed to have candy. But this time, he took the candy, unwrapped it. He was going to eat chocolate. He was going to do nothing else but eat chocolate. Not unconsciously while he's talking. To squeeze all the bliss out of it he could. With the full awareness that he's just using the chocolate for a momentary hit of this. And for the man or woman of wisdom, of course, they enjoy the sense objects. That used to confuse me because it was clear Swamiji was having a good time. But they are like a drop of water on the tip of a blade of grass falling into the ocean. The mind is immersed in the sound. This is what I think the Master Jesus meant when he said, "My kingdom is not of this world." My peace I give you, not as the world gives. It's a non-mediated, direct experience. And it's infinite. First of all, it's always there. You don't have to look your best. Doesn't cost anything. Won't rot your liver. And there's no end to how deeply the mind can revel in the sound. And this would confuse some of us in the early days of my sadhana, because we meet one Mahatma and yeah, they had some Shakti, they were kind of there. Then we meet another Mahatma, oh, it's like blasted. They were so more deeply absorbed in the sound. Do they know more self than the other Mahatma? No. These are post-enlightenment samadhis, and they are karmic. They're not necessarily achieved by will or effort. In fact, if you're struggling to get them, you're not even a jnani yet. Mark of the man of wisdom is he's given up struggle. But some Mahatmas, because of their punya, merit achieved in many, many lifetimes, have this incredible depth of self-absorption. We're blessed to be able to be in their presence. They can show us what a human being is capable of. Inspires us. Any thoughts on this? Next verse.
Ekam tyaktva nyadadatte sukham vaishayikam sada Natma tyajyena Natma tyajyona chadestam asmin navyabhichet katham. Love for an object of happiness always passes from one to another. They are objects that can be accepted or rejected, but the self cannot be treated like that. So, how can love of self change?
The love of the self is always there. And once you see what it is, once you get it, the world no longer has the power to delude us. The fool dances with the object when desire and object of desire become one. They say, oh, that was really great. Let me do that again. Give me more of that stuff. Yanni, if he dances with the object, desire and object of desire become one. Really stop my mind. Whoosh, whoosh. And then the objects no longer have the power to bind us. So when we have the instruction to see the self in and through the objects of the world, oh, it's far more visceral than you can imagine. That word even falls short. It means everywhere is the bliss of the self in and through the world. Without the world. No inside, no outside anymore. Next one.
Hanadana vihinesmin anupeksha chetrinadivat upekshitu swarupatvan nopekshatvam nijatmanah. Doubt. Even though it cannot be accepted or rejected, the self may be regarded as an object of indifference, like a piece of straw. Reply, no, because it is the very self of the person who is to regard it with indifference.
Yes, so even if I'm ignorant of my self nature and I disregard it, maybe, actually I don't. Because everything I do is for the love of the self. I don't disregard it. Oh, so and so was so mean to me. I felt terrible. Why did you feel terrible? Because you felt like yourself was attacked. Be nice to me. I like it when I have attention and approval. When I'm ego identified, I do it for the self. Oh, I really love chocolate. Why do you like chocolate? Because I feel happy when I eat chocolate. It's for the love of the self. Always. There is nothing else that's beloved in the end. Even when I don't consciously know it, I still do everything for the love of the self. This whole journey is so beautifully laid out in Narada Bhakti Sutra. So we learn the term prema, the great love of the infinite. We develop this warmth in our heart to love God, to be a premi, a lover of God. But the highest form of it, the Parama Prema, is Atmaramana, reveling in the bliss of the self. Next verse.
Tyaktum yogasya dehasya natmata tyaktureva sa na tyaktyar yasti sadvesha tyajye dveshe tuka kshatihi. When they desire, oh sorry, I missed a verse. I'm gonna read it again. Roga krodha bhibhutanam mumurša vikshate kvachit tato dveshat bhavetyajya atmeti yadi tannahi. Doubt. People begin to hate the self when they are overpowered by disease or anger and wish to die. Reply. This is not so.
No, so if you think you're your body, oh, I hate being alive, I want to die so I can get away from this body that hurts so bad. It's still love of the self. Even if you think you're your body, I want to be happy. My body hurts, makes me unhappy. Let's see how Vidyaranya responds.
Tyaktum yogasya dehasya natmata tyaktureva sa na tyaktya yasi sadvesha tyajye dveshe tu ka kshatihi. When they desire to do away with the body, it is an object for rejection, not their self. The self is the subject that desires the end of the body, and it feels no hatred for itself. What harm is there if they hate the body and object?
Yes. So if I have a pair of trousers that's too tight because I put on some weight and that's uncomfortable, I get rid of the trousers and I get some with a larger waistband. Same thing with the body. When it becomes uncomfortable, when you're sick, what's the joke? I was so sick I thought I was going to die, and then I got sicker and I was afraid I wouldn't. Because the body is an object. Now, what about suicide? Let's do a little side thing here. In the 12-step traditions, we have a term called a geographic. Someone lives in Chicago and they get drunk and do drugs and they get fired from their job and they're $18,000 behind in their rent and all their friends are disgusted with them and they run up all their credit cards and they say, it's Chicago. It's just a hard place to live. If I move to Los Angeles, it'll be better. So you go to LA and they're kind of a razzle dazzle. You get a good job, find a place to live, start to meet new people. But because they're a drug addict or an alcoholic, pretty soon they recreate the whole thing again. So the old slogan, wherever you go, there you are. Well, wherever you go, there your mind is too. And for people who want to commit suicide, it is rarely because of physical pain. For people who are terminally ill with cancer or something like that, or you've had a massive stroke, perhaps. But that's not why most people commit suicide. People commit suicide because they're miserably unhappy. Why? Their minds. When you die, your mind goes with you. The grosser part of the mind falls away. But all the proclivities are there. So you get to try again. It's not a solution. It's a spiritual, geographic. Well, this body didn't work. Maybe if I had a different body, that'll work. That's basically what we're doing. So if you're depressed and your life sucks and you're unhappy and you have suicidal ideation, I have news for you. Right here, right now. Solve the problem. Why am I unhappy? Attachment and identification. Regret for the past. Worry about the future. All the various vicissitudes of ego, of dripping. Let go. Go of the world. Nothing in this world is important enough for me to lose my serenity. Nothing. Once I make that decision, peace comes pretty quickly. Any thoughts on this? Next verse.
आत्मार्थत्वेन सर्वस्य प्रीतेश्चात्मा ह्यति प्रियः सिद्धो यथा पुत्रमित्रात् पुत्रप्रियतरस्तथा. All objects are desired for the sake of the self, and hence of all the objects that are loved, the self is dearest. A man's son is dearer to him than his son's friends.
So we all have this gradation of what or who is dear to me. I was, again, talking with another person on the phone. He and his girlfriend are going to split up. They really love each other. Now, he's at least 20 years older than she. They've got great physical chemistry. They really talk well together. But he's in his mid-50s and she's in her 30s. She wants to get married and make babies. He doesn't want children. To him, children are not dear. He doesn't like kids. She really wants them. So are children inherently joy-giving? No. For her, a child is joy-giving, meaning it's unconsciously a way to experience the happiness of the self. For him, having his freedom is joy-giving. It's a way for him to unconsciously experience the joy of his own self-nature. The yogi begins to see. Ultimately, the jnani sees the world is inherently neutral. Nothing is either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. And if I want it different than it is, it's going to create dukkha, suffering. Now, sometimes it's just low level. I have a preference. That's okay. I can let it go. If I really want it. And I cannot accept life on life's terms. Had a conversation with another person. It was so wonderful. He's 70 or 71, and he just got married. It's a gay man, and his partner's like 72 or 73. They're both in their 70s. And it was the most precious wedding. It was so beautiful, and there were so many wonderful things and people there. The vows were hysterically funny. This fellow was all upset because the wedding photographer, the videographer, in some of the shots, this fellow feels that he looks fat. I have news for you. You're fat. So he wants the videographer to edit all the fat scenes out. The videographer won't even respond to him. So upset, so suffering. Why? I want. Dukkha. Kama, dukkha. They are the same thing. If I try to satisfy all my desires, it's at best temporary. And when I get frustrated and I start controlling and try to dominate, then people turn on me. It gets even worse. And one of my favorite sayings from Yoga Vasishta: why try to cover the world in leather when you can wear shoes? What the yogi does. Lives a life of acceptance. All right, next verse.
Mana bhuvam aham kintu bhuyasam sarvadetyasau ashi sarvasya drishteti pratyaksha pratiratmani. May I never perish, may I ever exist, is the desire seen in all. So love for the self is quite evident.
So the vast majority of people, 99.9999% of them, who are identified with the body, may I always exist, may I never cease to be. And even those who are religious deal with the fear of the loss of the body, its inevitability. Oh, I can't wait till I die and go to heaven and I can see Aunt Mary and Uncle Fred. We have Swarga, heaven realms. Here's one for you. What if the doctrine of reincarnation is a total fabrication? My dad, who was Jewish, used to say, when a Jew dies, he's dead. Nothing left. What if that's what happens? So many people have such fear. The inevitability of death. something deep within us. Does not wish to cease to be. I think I'm the body or the personality. It's ego holding on. Let's see what Vidyaranya says about
it. Ityadi bhistribhi pritao siddhayameva matmani putra bharyat dishetvatmatnah kaischidi tiram. Though the self as the object of the highest love is taught by the scriptures and proved both by reasoning and experience, there are some who hold that the self is merely secondary to son, wife, etc., as an object of love.
this is an interesting point. So I had a conversation with someone who said, well, Jim, I'm not really interested in self-realization. I just want to get some tools to live my life better. I want to have a good family life. I want to have a good career. I want to have a car and good clothes and a fancy house and things like that. And if doing a bit of spirituality, make me a better person ethically, that's fine. A lot of people who approach religion all over the world from that viewpoint. And then they look at yoga, viveka, vairagya cha, discrimination between the real and the unreal, that desire to give up attachment to the things of this world and the personal sense of the self. When I'm not going to have any fun. They may even engage in some of these practices from some moral idea. But it doesn't last. It doesn't deliver the goods. We only begin to let go of the world through deep and profound insight and with a really gut level interaction with our suffering. When I finally get that it's the attachment, it's the identification that's making me so miserable, then mature mumukshutva arises, the desire for freedom. Classic example of this is those people who are in the 12-step traditions. Before people get clean and sober, if you had my problems, you'd drink too. Alcohol or drugs are my only friend left. Not aware that it's the drinking and the using that's causing the misery. And the person who's sober says, put the plug in the jug. It will get better. I can't. I'm too afraid. I'll cut down. I'll switch from brandy to beer. Some way to try to hold on to the attachment. Not realizing that it's the attachment, the addiction itself that's creating the misery. That's just an extreme form of the human condition. That's all it is. That's all it is. Thoughts on this? Next verse.
एतद्विवक्षया पुत्रे मत्वं श्रुतिरितम् आत्मा वै पुत्रनामेति तच्चोपनिषदि स्फुटम्. To support this, they quote the Shruti. Quote, the son indeed is the self, end quote, which shows the superiority of the son. This has been clearly spoken of in the Upanishad.
I don't know what he's quoting. I mean, it is good for a family to have children. It carries on culture, it carries on lineage. In a culture where there's no social net provided by the government, your children are there to take care of you in your old age or in your illness. But that doesn't mean that that's superior to this interior sannyas. Let's see what's said. Next.
So yasyam yamatma punyebhyah karmabhyah pratidhiyate athas yetara atmayam kritakritya pramiyate. Quote, the father's self, born in the form of the son, becomes his substitute for the performance of meritorious deeds. The self of the father, having fulfilled its purpose by begetting a son and having reached old age, departs. End quote.
So the problem here is in the Vedic literature, the word for self, Atma, is used sometimes to mean the body, sometimes to mean the subtle body, and sometimes to mean the supreme self. You have to interpret these passages of scripture from the eye of wisdom and contextually. So the way I would look at this particular passage, so if a father is too frail to perform the niyatam karmas, the obligatory rites that he needs to, can't get up and go to work anymore. His son can do that for him. How many of you Indian young men and women send money back to India to take care of your parents? It is so common in this country. If you have wealthy parents, it may not be a problem. But many first generation Indians send money back to take care of other family members who are struggling. That's the idea that's behind the scripture. All right, let's see what Vidyaranya says.
Satyapyatmani lokosti na putrasyat evahi anushishtham putrameva lokya ma purmanishinaha. A verse in the Brihadrana Aranyaka Upanishad says that in spite of the existence of the self, a man who has no son does not go to heaven. So the thinkers said that a son who is well trained in the Vedas helps his father to attain heaven.
So again, the objector here is quoting scripture to justify the value of familial relationships. Here, it's rooted in the religious notion. First of all, this is not moksha. This is going to swarga, heaven, punya loka. So what can happen is the children will do the rites, the pinda rites, where you do ritual to free the parents from what problem they may have so that they can advance. Does it work? I don't know. But for example, in the Christian church, you can say a mass for a relative to shorten their time in purgatory. Same idea. My personal feeling, I think we're all responsible for our own salvation. Nobody can really do it for us. And it's interesting because even today in Hindu culture, people will pay for a pujari to do a puja. And then they sit around talking with family. They're not even paying much attention to it. Have you seen that happen? He's doing all the work. No different than you write a check to the local Catholic Church. Oh, say a mass this day for Aunt Mary. Help her out of purgatory. Personal viewpoint. Krishna says in Gita, a person raises themselves into the self by themselves. And let them not lower themselves. But that's just my view. Going on.
Manushya loka jayaya syat putre naivetarena no mumurshu mantra yetra putram tvam brahmet yadi mantrakaihi. The joys of this world can be attained through the son and not by other things. The dying father therefore should instruct his son the Vedic truth. You are Brahman.
So the idea here at the end of the quote, what should a good father do to his child? Instruct him in the truth. Not that if you do a puja to Lakshmi, you'll be rich, but in the truth, you are Brahman. Then you have fulfilled your responsibility truly as a parent. And I think that's the end of the Vedic quote. Going on.
Ityadi shrutaya prahu putra bharya disheshatam laukika api putrasya pradhanya manu manvate. These Vedic verses are quoted to prove the importance of son, wife, and so forth, and one's own self as secondary. Ordinary people do admit the greater importance of a son.
So this is the objector still saying self-realization is not nearly as important as having kids. Let's see what happens.
I think it might be Vidyaranya just talking about all of this, like giving the perspective of the doubter.
Okay. But the whole point is, the larger thing I hope he gets to is, while from a worldly perspective, having kids can be important culturally. Well, let's look at the life of Adi Shankara. So if I remember, was it his dad that died or his mother was there on the river? He had asked to take sannyas. He says, no, you need to grow up, have a family, and take care of us. So there he is by the river, and he's grabbed by a crocodile and pulled out into the river. He says, Mama, can I release now before I die? Take sannyas. She said, okay. So he goes, sannyasoham, sannyasoham, sannyasoham. The crocodile lets him go. So he had no family, and In Vivekachudamani, he says you must renounce your attachment to family, to caste, to possessions. Walk away from it all. Inside. This is freedom. I'll show you that fellow who drove the Tesla pickup truck in front of the Trump Tower in Las Vegas, blew himself up. He had a mother and a father. Do you think having a child is a blessing to them? Oh, the pain that may have caused them. Or the young man, Jabbar, who ran over all the people in New Orleans. What his parents must be going through. Or maybe you know a parent with a disabled child, or a child that's sick and dies when they're young, childhood cancer. Can't say having a child is always a blessing. Cause great suffering too. Next verse.
स्वस्मिन् मृतेऽपि पुत्रादि जीवे द्वित्तादिता यथा तथैव यत्नं कुरुते मुख्या पुत्रादयस्ततः. A father labors hard to acquire wealth for the maintenance of his sons and others after his death. Hence, the son is superior to the self.
And I think this is the objector's opinion. So going on.
बाढमेतावतानात्मा शेषो भवति कस्यचित् गौणमिथ्या मुख्यभेदैरात्मायं भवति विद्धा. All right, but these texts do not prove the self to be less important. It is to be remembered that the word self is used in three senses: figurative, illusory, and fundamental.
So let's see if he modifies what that means. This goes back to what I was saying, that in the scripture, sometimes it means the body, sometimes it means the personal sense of self, the subtle body, sometimes it means the supreme self. So he's getting to the point here. So yes, the scriptures do talk about, in the relative sense, children are important. But let's see what he says. Going on.
Devadattastu sinho yam ityaikam gaunametayoho bhedasya bhasamanatvat putraderatmata tatha. In the expression, quote, Devadatta is a lion, end quote, the identification is figurative, for the difference between the two is evident. Similar is the case of the son and others as the self.
So here he means it's a figurative allusion. Dev Dattam is Sanskrit for John Doe. It's used in scripture to be an anonymous universal person. So and so's a lion. Meaning they're strong, they have lion-like qualities. Doesn't mean literally that they're a large jungle cat. So here he's saying that the use of the word self with reference to the son is figurative. Going on.
भेदोऽस्ति पञ्चकोशेषु साक्षिणो न तु भाव्यसौ मिथ्यात्मात् मिथ्यात्मतात् कोशानां स्थानो चौरात्मता यथा. Difference exists between the five sheets and the witness, though it is not evident, and so the sheets are illusory, like the thief seen in the stump of a tree.
Yes. So this idea that the self is the subtle body, the panchakosha, the five sheets, that is an illusory superimposition on the self. Yet people do it all the time. And the scriptures will use self in that context. For example, in Gita, in the second chapter, we're introduced to the doctrine of reincarnation. Swamiji used to say, reincarnation is the genealogy of the ghost and the post, the man and the stump, Purusha stump. It's illusory, even though we talk about it all the time. Next one.
न भाति भेदो नाप्यस्ति साक्षिणो प्रतियोगिनः सर्वान्तरात्वतत्यैव मुख्यमात्मा त्वमिष्यते. The witness consciousness is without a second, and therefore in it there neither appears nor is there any difference. As it is the innermost essence, it is accepted that the word self in its fundamental sense refers to the witness itself.
Yes. So, the fundamental final teaching of the Vedas, I am Atma, Brahma. This self is Brahman. And what is its nature? Satchidananda, pure existence, pure consciousness, and the fountainhead, the source of this absolute. Its nature is without any dukkha. That's the real meaning of self as it's found in the scriptures. Everything points to that. And because its nature is bliss, even when I dance with the world isn't bad, isn't to be avoided or shunned. It's just neutral. It's like someone going to a state dinner at the White House. And the woman puts on plastic snap beads, thinking that it's a pearl necklace. It's not pearls, it's plastic snap beads. I go for cars and houses and trips and fancy parties and clothes. They're not bad. They're just empty. There's nothing really valuable there. Trinkets and baubles, as I like to say. And this is what allows the jnani not to be attached. And therefore, they don't suffer the way ordinary people suffer. It's gone. Okay, let's do one or two more.
Satyevam vyavahareshu yeshu yasyatmatochita teshu tasyaiva sheshitvam sarvasyanyasya sheshata. As the word self has these three meanings in daily use, the suitable one becomes primary, the other two becoming merely secondary.
Yes. So what we want to always understand is every usage of the word self in scripture always ultimately points to the absolute reality. My opinion, I think this is one of the reasons in the teaching of the Buddha. He taught the doctrine of anatma, no self. He would use Buddha nature. I don't know, what other words has he used for ground of being?
Nibbana is another one, which is nirvana.
Nirvana. Other words. But because in 500 BCE, people were so confused about the self because of its various usage in Vedic literature. All right, one more and we'll quit.
Mumrishor griharakshadao gaunatmai vopayujyate na mukhyatma namityatma putra sheshi bhavatyatah. In the case of a dying man, giving charge of the family property and tradition to his son, the figurative meaning of self fits in, not the primary or the illusory meaning.
Okay, that pretty much sums it all up. He's going to go through and talk about how these are the limited use of the words self. So, what verse are we on for next week?
45.
45. We'll end here today. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om. Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha. Hari Om.